Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to welcome back Colin Watt. Colin, you've had a couple of weeks off. How are you doing?
I've managed to hide under all the things that have been happening at a minute, but no, as you said, I was away for my birthday, had a great time. Big shout out to the Tyneside number 1 CSC for welcoming me in for the Milan game the other day. But delighted to be back. Let's see what this week brings, and we'll see what the people have to say.
Indeed, there has been quite a lot happening in actual fact, but what I would say is, first off the bat, Liam Kelly, who's watching on YouTube, the podcast that makes lunch hours easier. Hail, hail. Liam, welcome to the show. Any comments you wish to make whatsoever? We're going to be talking about all things Celtic, all things topical. We'll be looking ahead to Thursday night's game against Lille. I'll be asking you your thoughts on Europe this season, Colin. Also, since you were last on the show, we've played 3 games. I'll ask you in a nutshell about your thoughts on those 3 games. And we'll be looking at maybe the press conference from yesterday. Neil Lennon and Lee Griffiths coming out, and your thoughts on, you know, whether or not there's a wee bit of thunder creeping back into the manager. Hopefully there is. The financials that have come out, you've had a look at them. And if we're talking about numbers, I also want to talk about Celtic by numbers. Alan Morrison, who runs a blog and has appeared on this podcast several times, has a look at this season to try and bring the numbers out regarding the performances, to justify or otherwise the criticism. And also some Eduard speculation, but when you look at it, is it anything different to what we already know? So that's what we're going to be running with today. I'm keeping an eye on the messages coming in, and we'll get through as many of them as we possibly can. Colin, first and foremost, give me an update on the last 3 games from your perspective. We won't labour the points, but what have you taken from that? Have you seen signs of improvement in the last couple of games? How disappointed were you in team selections and performances? Give us a take on that.
Do you know what? I think everyone can agree it's been a hard week. It kind of started with the game against Rangers, and that was quite disappointing for me, just because it felt as if there wasn't that sort of emphasis that we normally have when we go into games against them, where we try and come out and we have a go at them. I felt as though we were quite reserved in that game, that we weren't getting the service up to the striker, and we didn't really create. I thought we didn't have a single shot on target, and we've kind of talked about that, and the guests that you've had on have done the same, and they've went on and mentioned a lot of the things that probably I would bring up as well. But it just, for me, is gutting to lose a game like that. You don't want to ever lose a game to Rangers, so it took a while to go over that. We moved on then to Thursday night and against AC Milan. I didn't think we would have beat AC Milan. I think AC Milan, although they were ranked 3rd in the seedings, that was unfair to them because they are a fantastic side. You look at the players that they had in that squad, not just even up front with Zlatan, but even at the back, guys like Simon Kjaer and Donnarumma in goal. They're a very good side. I had a feeling though that when we were 2-0 down, if we got a goal, we would have got back into that game, and that's exactly what happened. When we came out in the second half, we looked certainly a different team. The performance level upped. We got the goal, and we were certainly pushing on and trying to get that second one, and it was just times like that when we get caught out. It reminded me a lot of the Cluj qualifier last year, when we were pushing on for that goal and we left ourselves short at the back. Against Aberdeen, it's a tough place to go. We've managed to make it a bit of a fortress for ourselves when we got up there, because we had won quite a few times up there, and we tend to put in very good performances. 3 games in a week, there were certain players that looked as if didn't have it in the legs for them that they could do the 3 games. The team selection was a bit strange. I wouldn't have left Scott Brown out for a game like that. We showed good character to come back twice and then to go in front. But what we do really need to work on within the team, and I think Lennon knows that, and I think everybody that's out here can agree on that, is it really has to be looking at the defence and tightening that defence. If we can stop conceding the goals, we give ourselves a better chance of winning the games. And when you look back at each of those games, there's so many defensive errors that if we really work on and improve, then it will start relating to our performances. And we're now 10 games into the season, 11 games into the season. We've conceded 10 league goals. The defence still hasn't really put together a performance that you'd say has been worthy of them being the back 3. We're at a difficult period in the season, but I really just hope that we start getting on a run now that can turn it round. There's been a lot of discussion whether Lennon is the right man or not. I said away back when he was given the job after the treble, I didn't think he was the right man for the job. Doesn't mean I don't support the team, doesn't mean I don't back the team, because I do. I never want to lose a game as a Celtic fan. Doesn't matter who we're playing, I want to win that game. And every time that we do lose, it breaks you. I've got friends I know that went into a room and didn't come back out for a couple of hours after the Rangers game because it hurts. You've got to go into work through the week. You've got to face the Rangers fans that would gloat in your face. You've got to face all that. So you never want to be in that position. And we don't want to get to a stage where Celtic are an easy target for people to come out and say, oh, look at what's happening to you guys this season. You don't want to be that. You want to be the best of the best. And I think every fan, whether they want to be pro Lennon or they want to see Lennon go, only want what's best for Celtic Football Club. And as fans, that's all you can ask for at the end of the day.
We'll go into a lot of the comments that are coming in, because again, as well as doing the Celtic State of Mind Bulletin, Colin, a massive part of that is engaging with Celtic fans and taking as many views as possible. It's all about people with differing views all pulling hopefully in the same direction, like you've suggested there, for the betterment of Celtic. So if I have a view and I've raised a view and people disagree with it, that's fine. You can disagree, you can criticise, but going on to one of the points that's been brought up by Mr. Briggs, and it's all about kind of online abuse. Mr. Briggs saw the grief you were getting on Twitter, Paul. We know the haters. They're the type of fans who spend too much time reading blogs about Rangers finances and Castori kits. Heads are in the sand. Well, I won't labour the fact, Colin, but obviously there's a lot of abuse being targeted at myself for having a viewpoint on this season and the reasons behind the poor performances. Not one result, as a lot of people say, not 2 or 3 results, the entire season as a whole, and what has happened to Celtic since last season. Now, I know there isn't a magic switch, particularly with the lockdown, the pandemic and everything else, with the long period with no football, Colin. You don't just flick on that switch and you pick it up from where you left off. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we think back to that game against St Mirren, 5-0, Griffiths scores a hat-trick, you come away, you're playing great football, you're looking at the 2 strikers, everything's rosy. But that's then. And what I'm looking at is now. And that's why I'm saying, in terms of the balance, I'm going to be going through some of the points made by Celtic by numbers in terms of the actual stats and the performance data that he presents in relation to how Celtic are playing this season. And I feel that we're in a situation at the moment where we have mitigating circumstances, and I've gone through all this all week and I'm not going to go through it again, but it's resulted in a huge amount of abuse, which, you know, there was a part yesterday where I was being accused of posting things that I didn't post and calling Neil Lennon certain names and all this kind of stuff, which simply wasn't true. That gets to the ridiculous stage. There's no toxic nature to a Celtic State of Mind whatsoever, but I have a view, and I think a lot of people share that view going by some of the other messages that have been aired. Just on the point of looking at other teams, Mr. Briggs, I take that point, and I think it's something that Anthony mentioned last Monday on the podcast. Let's concentrate on Celtic and what we're doing or what we're not doing right, and let's improve that. I'm all about Celtic. You know, yeah, there's a team challenging us this season, and I think it is a real challenge. Could they handle the amount of injuries that Celtic have had this season with illnesses chucked on top? No chance. Absolutely no chance. They don't have the depth of squad, Colin. Will the players coming back into our squad improve the performances and ultimately the results? I hope they do. I mean, I was going through the team, the predicted team, as I always do for every game, Colin, yesterday, and just by having El Hamid back, hopefully he is back because he's in my team, it makes the selection so much easier because the whole shape of the side can change if you decide to play 4 at the back, and obviously I will ask you about that. Now, interestingly enough, Liam Kelly earlier on had said that the podcast that makes lunch hours easier, and MB is admitting that it's the podcast that makes breakfast more enjoyable. So I hope you enjoyed your long lie, MB. But it's all about Celtic for me, and it's all about progressing, maintaining as well, because at the moment, you know, obviously on Sunday we're playing a Scottish Cup game from last season, Colin. That domestic dominance is unheard of. You know, yes, Celtic have won 9 in a row on 2 occasions in history, but the level of domestic dominance, when you look at the trophies that we've won along the way, the trebles that we are accumulating and still are accumulating, if all goes well on Sunday, that dream is still alive. This is something that I want to continue, not because, in the words of one of the commentators yesterday, that I'm an entitled Celtic fan. I'll tell you what I am entitled to, though, is my opinion. But I'm not an entitled Celtic fan who thinks that we're entitled to win every game and win every trophy. But when you're watching a Celtic side and you can see issues with that Celtic side, surely we're able to comment on that. Surely we can criticise performance, Colin. There's no toxic agenda going on at a Celtic State of Mind. We are able, like Celtic fans that we are, to criticise the players, the team, the management, those even above Neil Lennon. If you can't criticise, you know, there is no soundboard for any kind of engagement with Celtic supporters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had it quite a few times on social media and other places where I get told, you don't remember the 90s. Well, I'm sorry, I was born in 93. I don't remember the 90s. But we can't live in the past. We can't live on past glories. We can't live on past failures. We have to look at the team as it is now, and you can only say what you see. And if you're in the camp that says, I don't believe that Neil Lennon's got the ability to take the team forward, then you're well within your rights to say it.
And then I'll balance that view, Colin. I'll balance that view.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll also back up my reasons for saying it. I was accused yesterday of going on a Neil Lennon witch hunt. Nothing has been further from the truth in relation to Neil Lennon and my views on Neil Lennon as a player, as a manager first time round, as an interim manager second time round, and when he finally got the job. I showed you a screenshot of a message that I had sent about my thoughts 1 week before Neil Lennon got the job permanently, 1 week before the Hearts Cup final, Colin. And it only came up by luck because the same person messaged me, and then I looked back on the conversation and they asked me who do I think would be the Celtic manager and if we win the Scottish Cup, and I said Neil Lennon, but he wouldn't be my choice. And then I said why he wouldn't be my choice and who would be my choice. But what's happened since he became manager, Colin? Have I backed the team? Every single step of the way I backed Neil Lennon.
Remember, if we go back to the Ferencváros game, in the studio that night was yourself, myself and Kevin Maguire.
Yes.
And at that point I turned round and actually became a meme for Rangers fans because I quite rightly said that I didn't think Lennon had the capability to manage us at that point. Now, in the podcast that came after that, we had to admit that the performances got slightly better. The results, we won games, and we gave him credit for that in the way that he managed and brought in some of the players that he brought in this summer. Now, it's been a really hard week, right? There's no getting away from the fact it's been a really hard week. But the way that Neil Lennon came out yesterday suggests that he's already moved on from that week. And the comments that he said, some of them I can't agree with. He says he doesn't know in any reason why that it would be possible for people to be talking about him potentially losing his job. I'm sorry, but some of the performances this season have gave people that opinion. Rightly or wrongly, they've given people that opinion. So you can't say that there's no reason out there why he could potentially be up for losing his job.
That's basically saying you're untouchable.
Yeah. At
this stage.
But
I don't think anyone is.
What I want to see from him is that sort of thunder, that attack, because when I watch him in the dugout, he just sits there half the time, arms folded. And it was a point that you touched on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. It isn't just the camera crew cutting to him every time he's doing that. It just seems as though that is the way he is this season. I want to see that passion, that thunder. When Neil Lennon took over as temporary manager when Brendan Rodgers left, we played Dundee at Dens Park and we scored in the last minute. And he sprinted down the touchline to the Celtic fans to celebrate with them. Neil Lennon's a Celtic fan, right? He's a Celtic man, and everybody that's a Celtic fan gets that backing from the Celtic support. For me, all I want to see from him is for him to bring that thunder and bring that encouragement and that enthusiasm, get it into the dressing room and get the players to be as enthusiastic, and the will and desire for the team and the will and desire to win to come back into this squad, because we are missing it at the moment.
Now, we will have a look, obviously, at Thursday night. Colin, your thoughts on Europe this season, your thoughts on the possible lineup, what we need to do to try and get that thunder back, as you say, the famous speech that Lenny gave us back in the day. Now, Stephen Forbes is asking for our thoughts on Neil Lennon's comments, and particularly if things start to deteriorate rapidly, I'll hold my hands up and say this isn't working. We need to look at something else. But at the moment, we're nowhere near that.
No.
And you're disagreeing with that?
No, I mean, there has been points this season where the performances aren't of the standard of a Celtic team, especially with the sort of money that we've spent on the team. When you look at the finances this season, I think we've spent over 20 million on the team. We spent 20 million the season before as well. You want to see us getting to the point where we should be ahead of everything else in Scottish football. But the performances just haven't shown that this season. What I did do actually, Paul, was I took a look at this because I felt as if we've maybe played this season before. You know, that way you just kind of get that deja vu feeling.
That's what happens when you win 9 league titles in a row. And I took a look back and it kind of reminded me of the 2011-12 season, right?
Where Celtic won the first of the 9. And after 11 games in that season, we had 22 points. We'd scored 23 goals and conceded 12. This season we're on 26 points, having scored 28 and conceded 10. We won 7 that season, we've won 8 this season. We'd drawn 1, which was the 3 each game with Kilmarnock. We've drawn 2 this season. And we'd lost 3 that season. We've only lost the 1 this year to Rangers. Now, when you look at some of the players that were the key players back then, we're looking at Gary Hooper, Anthony Stokes, Charlie Mulgrew, Ki Sung Young, James Forrest, who was still there, Joe Ledley, guys like that. When you look at who the top scorer was after 11 games, it was Anthony Stokes with 5 goals. If we look at who's our top goal scorer this season, it's Albion Ayeti with 5 goals. Gary Hooper was your top talisman back then. He only had 4. Edward's our top talisman now. He's only got 4. There's a lot of similarities that come back to that season. Daniel Mestorovic came in on a free transfer. The defence was very shaky back then. We seen it when we went to Rugby Park. Some of the goals we conceded that day were absolutely horrendous. The second goal against Aberdeen the other day was horrendous as well. Shane Duffy should just clear that ball out of the park. So there is a lot of similarities there in that season. But that game against Rugby Park, when you listen to the interview and what Neil Lennon says in the dressing room, he tells them that he's going to lose his job. Now, he's come out yesterday and says, I don't see any reason why I would be losing my job. So it's not completely similar, but there is a lot of kind of similarities between the two seasons. And if we look back at how we went on from there, in the 27 games after that, we won 23, drew 2 and lost 2. And one of the losses came after the league had already been wrapped up at Rugby Park. All we want from this squad is to find that spark that kicks them on, because when you look at the squad and you look at who you've got, then there is the potential to beat every single team in the league.
No, I agree with that. I rate the squad highly. I think we've got the depth, Colin, we've got the quality, and the issue that I've got is there was a moment obviously in that season where things turned round. There was a moment last season where, you know, ultimately things turned round after the defeat against Rangers. And this season round, you're thinking that, well, there's been a couple of moments where you're expecting, right, this is going to turn around, this is going to click into place. What's the game plan? I keep asking people the same questions. What is the game plan? What's the 3 games you've been impressed with this season? You know, who's improved this season on last? These are difficult to answer at times. But we will go through some of the points that are being made via Twitter, Facebook and on YouTube, because some of the points being made are brilliant. And Liam Kelly was glad that Lenny came out fighting in the press conference, but hope that filters down to the team and also him on the touchline. Now, I'm not asking for Lenny to be screaming and shouting and bawling on the touchline, but it's like sometimes the reactions after a goal is that you would maybe celebrate that, you would maybe feel a sense of relief over that, but nothing, absolutely nothing, just, you know, no emotion whatsoever. Everybody deals with it differently, but I think over the years we've got to know Neil Lennon's normal demeanour, and it seems to be different this season. What I take totally offence to is, you know, getting told by people who haven't paid into a football game since they started their journalistic career, saying that Celtic fans feel entitled to do things and entitled to win things. But we are entitled to an opinion, Colin, whereas these people obviously get paid for their opinion and they're mocking Celtic fans. I think the comments for Lennon to go were described as erratic by someone who runs a site who 2 weeks ago had Charlie Adam on it, talking about behind the scenes issues in relation to Ayer and Beaton. That was fairly erratic, you know, to come out with any kind of claims, unfounded claims at that. So I don't think it's erratic to start looking at performance of the team or the manager. But what I'm hoping for, again, I'm going to ask you about Thursday night, because a lot of Celtic fans I've been speaking to or hearing online, the comments coming through, is that to forget about Europe. And I just can't accept that for a few reasons. That night, that game on Thursday night might be the game that I'm talking about. That might be the pivotal game. Your Kilmarnock in 2012 or your Rangers last season. This might be the game where everything turns around and we start seeing a fluidity to the play, a belief that we can turn a game round when it's not going well, because I've never seen that yet this season against Rangers. At any point, did you believe that we could turn it around? Did you believe that changes could be made that would actually pull us back in? Now, going back to a point that Lauren said yesterday, Colin, and a few people criticised them for it, the improvement I seen against AC Milan was that when we pulled it back to 2-1, we were on for a 2-2 at that point. We were actually the team who were pushing to equalise, and then obviously the sucker punch at the end made the result seem almost like a walkover. And I know that AC Milan had taken some players off and they were trying to manage the game out, and Celtic maybe stepped up a gear as Milan stepped down one, and that might have been a part of it. So I did see a response against AC Milan, and then you go into Aberdeen, you're thinking, let's build on that. But then the Aberdeen thing, again, it was almost as if we've got the handbrake on a steep hill and we're trying to get started again, and we're 3-2 up and we can't manage that game out. Yeah. You know, people say, what, you can't legislate for individual errors. No, you can't, but it's the same individual brilliance that wins you games. So you can't take it away from the manager and with one hand and give it back on the other. The manager is responsible ultimately for the way we shape up. And I'm going to ask you about Thursday night. A, how important is Europe this season to you as a fan? And then B, how do we shape up against Lille on Thursday night?
I just want to touch on something you mentioned about the Aberdeen game. I think that was one of our issues in that game, was the game management. We were talking about bringing on substitutions, and when you're kind of 3-2 up, you look at the bench and you've got guys like Sorrow and Welsh, who are more defensive minded players. When you're maybe trying to see out a 3-2 game and you've got the opportunity to bring 5 subs on, they should potentially be some of the players that you bring on to sort of shore up the defence, whether you go to 5 at the back or whether you put 5 in midfield or whatever it is. But you can't let the team be overrun the way Scott Wright ran through that midfield. Someone should have taken him out near the halfway line to stop him getting anywhere near the box before the ball comes across. So we do have to work on our game management in that sense. That also kind of goes back to the AC Milan game as well. We're pushing for the goal and then we leave ourselves open at the back. So game management is something we do need to work on. Thursday night, what I really want to see from the team on Thursday night is a bit more defensive shape. I want to see us not conceding sloppy goals, because we've conceded quite a few sloppy goals. The 2 goals against Rangers were very, very sloppy. The first one against AC Milan and the third one as well. I just want to see us put together a performance where whoever's playing at the back offers a bit more solidity, because we want to kind of get that solid defence going to make us hard to beat, and then we take it up and we look on the strikers to get the goals.
You know, the thing on that point there, talking about the defence, because it's been a massive issue this season, Colin, everybody's crying out for a new centre half. Now at that time our central half positions were filled by Ayer and Julien. That's the partnership that we had. Everybody's crying out for a new centre half. We go out and we bring in Shane Duffy, which was a popular signing. Now Julien's been out injured. Duffy's not been playing so well. Everybody's crying out for Julien to come back in. So we're actually going back to a point where we've got a partnership there that no one was happy with. So I just think we're continually told about this hysteria. Everything's going to be all right once the players come back. Well, let's look at Julien, because we had Julien in there, right, in the centre half position as a first pick with Ayer, and we weren't happy with that. And after the Kilmarnock game, Ayer gets dropped, but we needed a centre half. There was a desperation. Let's get a centre half, and we brought one in. Republic of Ireland captain, no less. He comes in to shore up the defence. Julien's out. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about once Julien comes back in, the defence is going to be solid. But we've seen the defence wasn't solid when Julien was in there with Ayer. The same goes for Edouard, a player who is without doubt the most talented footballer in Scottish football. But this season, he hasn't been his usual self. I don't think anybody is going to argue the case that Edouard's been at his best this season, Colin, right?
No.
So we're desperate to get him back. Of course we are. But I think we're thinking back to the Edouard who linked up with Griffiths last season. We're certainly not thinking about the Edouard who we've seen so far this season. So he comes back, but he played in a lot of the poor performances that we have seen this season, leading up to obviously the Rangers game that you missed. So we were dreadfully poor in the 2-1-0 games in Europe. He played in both games. He played in the Dundee United game, got kicked all over the park. That was a poor performance. So we're bringing players back. Of course they're going to make things easier for Neil Lennon when he's selecting a side. But they weren't in great form before they went out. No, definitely not. As you said, if you ask someone to mention 3 great games that we've had this season, you would struggle. Full games, certainly. I mean, one of our kind of highest scoring performances is the 5-0 game against Ross County. But Ross County could have had 2 or 3 goals in that game as well. It could have been one of those 5-4s that we've seen down in the English Premier League. Yeah.
So we do struggle in that sense to get a 3 or a 5 or a 4, whatever we're playing, to get it sort of like that is the team that we go with. If I have the chance here just to mention that when you look at the Rangers side at the minute, when they're swapping players in and out, they're swapping like for like, they're keeping their formation, they know what's working for them. At the minute, I don't think Lennon knows what's working for him. You see the changes are happening even in the middle of games. The AC Milan game, we went from 3 at the back to 4 at the back. That worked. We tried 4 at the back at the weekend, didn't quite work. So I don't think Lennon's got that tied down to what he wants to play. But again, does that come down to some of the players that we've got? If you're playing 4 at the back, I wouldn't have Frimpong as your right back, because he's very much an attack-minded player. We've seen that where the defenders get pulled out of position because Frimpong's so far up the park. It leaves gaps in the middle, and the other teams are exploiting on it. So who would you play there? Is El Hamid the guy to play at right back and Frimpong goes further forward? We are missing James Forrest at the moment. Can Frimpong offer the same service as James Forrest? I think personally Frimpong's been slightly poor over the last few games. I don't know what you make of that.
Well, on that point, I think it's maybe a good time actually to look at the lineup that I would suggest for Thursday night. And it's taken a lot of these points into consideration, Colin, because I would start ordinarily, even though he's been getting criticism, I would normally start with Barkas, but I believe he's out, so you're going to have to start with Scott Bain.
Yep.
And goals. At right back, I would hopefully be able to play with El Hamid at right back, if he is fit and available, which I think he will be on Thursday night. On the left, I would play Taylor. I would play Greg Taylor, the much maligned Greg Taylor. If you're playing at a back 4, for me, yeah, you can have full backs who are overlapping, but I don't think you play wing backs at full back, and I think that's what Laxalt and Frimpong give you. They're further up the park for me. And then your 2 centre halves are still Ajer and Duffy. Now, Duffy hasn't become a bad player overnight. He's had a few poor games, and I think that we have no other option at this moment in time than to play him, because if you don't, then you're maybe playing El Hamid at centre-half, Ajer at right-back, which a lot of people are suggesting. Your other right-back option is Anthony Ralston, who's sat on the bench a couple of times this season. So no, for me, your back four is to have right-back El Hamid, left-back Taylor, and your two centre-halves, Duffy and Ajer.
It's funny you say that, but who is the other options there? It is only Ajer or Duffy at the minute, isn't it?
Well, unless you play Welsh.
Julian's out injured. Welsh, I think he's going to be a player that we can probably rely upon for certain games in the season. I kind of think Welsh is a bit like Darren O'Day, where he can come in and play here and there, but you wouldn't play him every single week. And certainly there'll be times where he'll be caught out because he's not really played a lot of first team football. He went down to Morton on loan last season and he was playing at right back, and he's played 3 or 4 times now for us. So he's only played 4 technically professional football games.
Yep.
So it's a lot to ask of the boy. So you're right, it's Ajer and Duffy. That's the only kind of options you've got, and all you can hope is that they can put their performances behind them. As you said, Ajer's been certainly better over the last few weeks. Duffy's not. So I kind of hope that eventually they'll click and we'll keep a clean sheet. That's all I'm looking for.
Well, that would be good, because obviously if you do that, you're going to have a positive result.
Yeah.
So the question of like Salt and Frimpong, I'd still play them, but I'd play them along much higher up the pitch with Christie in the middle. So they're my 3. Behind James McGregor and Brown, and then one up top at this moment in time would be Lee Griffiths. So now that's because I was disappointed with Ajeti. I don't think Ajeti can play up front as a lone striker.
Right, so I'm just trying to work this out. So you're playing 4-2-3-1.
Yep.
And you have Bain in goal. We've got El Hamid right back, Ajer, Duffy, Taylor.
Yep.
Brown, McGregor. Frimpong, Christie, Laxalt, Griff.
Yes. That's my team. That's my team for Thursday night.
It's interesting.
Now, I think you've got the 4 at the back, so although there's a lot of attacking options up there, and you would still be expecting Laxalt and Frimpong to be tracking back, for me, you need a right back and a left back, and I think that's what you get with Taylor and El Hamid. I mean, I've said before, Frimpong offensively, I'm going to take what you've said there and say, yeah, he's not that complete player that Forrest is, and people say Forrest isn't a complete player. I mean, I tell you what, I'd like to have Forrest on Thursday night, but he's obviously long-term injured. But I still think Frimpong has performed well in Europe this season, Colin. I think he's still a player who's a good outball, and I think that when Christie's playing, he can feed Laxalt and Frimpong. He's very good at that. It gives us balance to have Laxalt and Frimpong in that position. But
the only criticism I've got with Frimpong at the moment is he's still developing to the point where his final ball is really lacking. There was times against AC Milan where he had the left back in his back pocket.
He was
getting down, but his final ball let us down time and time again. And I'm sure as a player, again, I think he's only maybe played about 25, 30 professional football games. So that will come in time. But it is a problem for us at the minute because we're relying on him to create all that service for us.
Again, we don't have many options out there.
No, we don't.
If you look at the fact Forrest is out, Karamoko Dembele started off as a backup. He was on the bench. He's out of the picture at the moment. So we don't have many options out wide right. I mentioned before Klamala's played a few games wide right, and James had mentioned that as well. Again, nowhere near the team for me at this moment in time, particularly on that position. But that is how thinly covered we are in some positions. When you're looking at a right back, Colin, if you don't have El Hamid, your recognised right back is Tony Ralston. You're then looking to play Ajer out of position if you play him at right back. I know that he's filled the position a few times. Frimpong, is he a right back? I've not seen it yet. I really haven't. And I think when you're talking about going into 4 at the back against Aberdeen, that would be my criticism. Like Salt and Frimpong were playing like, wing backs. And it did expose the centre-halves time and time again. There was many occasions where they broke away, and at no point did Frimpong get back into position. At no point before the ball was either knocked out of play or Or cleared. So I don't think we have many options down that right hand side at the moment. If you bring someone like Elhamed back in, it's a massive boost for Thursday night.
Yeah, the thing with Elhamed as well is when we look at some of his crosses into the box, he put the crossover for Lee Griffiths away at St Johnstone. He does have that ability to go forward, but he's very, very comfortable in his own half, where we might be for a lot of this game against Lille, because they're no mugs. They're a fantastic side. I think they're top of the table at the minute in the French league. We might be doing a lot of defending this game. So if Frimpong's kind of left one-on-one with whoever's going to be playing on their left, then I think I'd probably rather have Elhamed, because he's got that defensive sort of the natural defensive capability, whereas Frimpong's more naturally a forward player.
Definitely.
I wouldn't go near Anthony Ralston at the minute, not for a game like this.
Neither would I, but that is at the moment, if you take away Elhamed, our only recognised right back. Can you tell me your predicted team for tomorrow night?
I would go with, well, obviously we have to go with Bain in goal. I would like to see Elhamed in as well at right back. What is the situation when you're Beaton at the moment?
Now, there was mention that he wouldn't be back for Thursday night's game. Edouard perhaps will make the bench, with Elhamed being the most likely to return.
See, I think we do miss Beaton's calming influence in that team. When we played the 3-5-2 and Beaton was one of the three centre halves,
if he was fit, would you play three at the back?
I wouldn't play three at the back, but I'd be half tempted to have him in at centre half.
And then you talking Ayer right back?
No, I would have Ayer and Beaton as my two defenders
and drop Duffy. Would you? Do you think that's what Duffy needs at this moment? No,
I think so.
Can he play through this?
When you look at Shane Duffy, he's got that leadership skill, but he's not shown it yet. I don't know why, because he's the captain of the Republic of Ireland. When you look at his performances for the Republic of Ireland, he's thrown himself into everything, left, right and centre, but he just hasn't shown that yet for us. And I think Beaton has been very reliable for us. He's not a natural central defender, but he does step into that role very well. He played very well for Israel in that position as well. So, I mean, it's another option that's there. If Duffy isn't on form, you need someone that's going to come in and push him for a place. So it's Julian or Beaton, and Beaton's probably closest back to fitness. But if Beaton's unavailable, it will be Ayer and Julian. I don't know.
Duffy. Julian.
Sorry, Duffy and Ayer. Left back, I don't really know. Laxalt's not put a foot wrong since he came in.
No.
And I think he has got something different to Frimpong, where he is quite comfortable defending as well as going forward. So I would probably put him at left back. I know you've got Greg Taylor in there, but I would have Laxalt at left back. In the middle of the park, I would have Brown and McGregor. Callum McGregor's coming up for a bit of criticism at the minute, but I think what you don't see about Callum McGregor's performances is what he does off the ball and how he kind of controls the game there. He gets a lot of stick because he's not really doing much, but that's only because it's what you're seeing on the camera. If you were at the game and you're watching it, you'd see the difference that McGregor can make, and he played well to get the goal on Sunday. So I'd have Brown and McGregor in there. Can
I ask you, just whilst you're in full flow, I'm going to ask you about McGregor. Are you happy where he is playing at the moment in a deeper role? Do you think his effectiveness going forward is something that from time to time we would benefit from? I mean, there's a lot of these games where we've underwhelmed and we're looking for a creative force up front, and we've seen McGregor doing that time and time again. We're not seeing it as often this season.
No, we're not, but you just see, I mean, some of the times that he has actually made the chance to go forward. I'm thinking about his goal at home to Motherwell, the goal at the weekend. He has got that capability going forward to be that number 10. He does it for Scotland as well. But who else then plays in that role? Because we've had so many people come out and say, and Cham's been poor this season, but he steps up for the European games. So do you play Browning and Cham in there, or do you play Brown and McGregor?
We've both gone for Brown and McGregor, right?
Yeah.
Do you think Neil Lennon will? Because obviously he kept his place against Aberdeen, did in Cham. So do you think he's done enough, or will he be dropped for Thursday night?
But I don't know what Neil Lennon's thoughts are in Cham, because it seems to change quite often. When you look at pre-season, and Cham was the captain for the B team. When you brought the B team on in the second half, he was the man that was there. There was guys getting games ahead of him that are now not in the squad. So I don't know what it is with Cham. I mean, I think personally he's a fantastic player. I think there's a lot of talent in there, and his problem this season has been his consistency. I don't think his consistency's been there. But I just know you will get a performance out of Brown and McGregor. So for that reason, that's why I would have them two in the side.
You surprised Brown was dropped for Pittodrie?
I was.
Yep.
As much as he's not got the he's not shown the performances week after week this season, he's still got that influence on the park, and you can see when he's on the park that the players do tend to play a bit better. When we look at the game, I think it was the St Johnstone game, when he came off the bench, everyone seemed to up their game 10%.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I'd probably say Brown would start that game. Wide right, I would go Ryan Christie. I think Ryan Christie is effectual on either wing, left or right. I'm not so sure about his position as a 10. I don't know if he can really play in that position. I like him out on the wide. I think he puts a good ball in. Not so much at corners, but when he's putting a cross in, he's pretty decent. In the centre of that, I would go with Tom Rogic. I think Tom Rogic is certainly starting to make his way back to some of his better performances. Not quite there yet. I know people will come in and say I didn't think he was good at the weekend, but I thought a lot of what was good about Celtic came through Tom Rogic.
2 assists.
Yeah. So when you've got someone like that, keep giving him the ball and see what he can do. Left midfield, I'd probably still go with Elyounoussi. I know he's not been at his best this season, but he is a natural left-footed player. He plays out on the left-hand side. I think he can get a good partnership built up with Lassalt, where maybe Lassalt does the overlapping run and Elyounoussi cuts inside, or they switch over. Elyounoussi also offers a bit more of a defensive option as well. So I would go with him, and I would go with Lee Griffiths up front.
Right, so what's your reasoning for the striker? We've got 3 fit. I think Edward might at the very most make the bench. We've got 3 fit strikers. Why are you going for Griff?
I would go for Griff because he's the one that's there that comes across to me as a natural lone striker. He's someone, when you look at when he scored 40 goals for Celtic in the one season, he was the number 1 striker. He was the only striker that was up there. He was getting the service. He makes the runs for himself. He gets in behind and he takes the shots on. You look at the goal at the weekend, kind of came out of nothing, cuts back, puts it into the top bag. I couldn't see someone like Albin Ayeti or Patrick Klimala doing that. Some say he's not fit, some say he's just not been given a chance. When he has been on the park, he's certainly made a difference. I see Ayeti as a 2. I'd see him up front alongside someone.
I thought you meant right back.
No. Alongside someone. I'd like to see the partnership with him and Edward eventually. But when you're going with the one up front, you want somebody that's going to run themselves into the ground, is going to give you everything for 90 minutes. I would go with Lee Griffiths. What
was your thoughts yesterday on his press conference? He seemed pretty focused.
It's good to see him back in that scenario. I mean, to me it suggests that he's in a good space at the minute. That he can go out and he can face the press, and that he can get himself into that sort of mind frame that his concentrations are on what's happening on the park, and that's exactly what I want to see from Lee Griffiths.
Now, Mark O'Donnell, good afternoon, lads, and good afternoon to you, Mark. You're commenting on YouTube. If you are watching on the channel, please subscribe to that. It's all free. That was another thing that we need to underline. Everything we do is free. Keep up the good work. It's good to have spirited and honest debate. We have to get behind Lenny and the players. They seem to be getting a siege mentality. No bad thing. What do you think of the siege mentality? Is that what Neil Lennon's good at? Does he come back fighting when he's had this level of criticism?
We need to see, don't we? I mean, okay, the second half against Aberdeen was far better than the first half, so you could say that's a bit of siege mentality that we're going out to win, but we're still lacking at the back. We still need to be hard to beat. See, when you look at Scotland's performances over the last few months, you look at some of the players that's playing in there, Andrew Considine and Declan Gallagher.
I know
they're not great defenders, but the way that Steve Clark set them up, Scotland are becoming harder and harder to beat. Celtic need to do that as well, because they know that when they've got the ball up front, it's not someone like Ollie McBurney up there that's chasing it. We've got guys that are actual footballers that are up there that can chase it and can put the ball in the back of the net. So if you stop the goals going in at one end, it makes it easier for us to get up there and to get the goals in.
We seem kind of top heavy just now with regards to the players, because when you're getting up to that centre forward position, like I says to you, we've got three options, potentially a fourth. When you're looking at, who do you play on the left, you're talking about El Yunusi, I'm picking in Laxalt. So you've got options. It's when we get to the back at the moment, Colin, even with everybody fit, we're still lacking at right back, we're still lacking at left back. Julien is a more long-term absentee, so then you're looking at, right, we're looking for Elhamed and Beaton to come back. Beaton is an adapted centre-half. There's a suggestion here from Dominic Boyle, and it's not the first time I've heard this. I would love to see Ayer in sitting midfield. I spoke in a previous podcast about that to Stevie Mullen, who's been involved in football and management and playing football. He doesn't reckon Ayer would be as effective. I think since Duffy's come in actual fact, you were talking about the influence of Duffy, the leadership qualities of Duffy, I think he has assisted Ayer in many ways. I think Ayer's performances have improved. You were also talking about throwing himself in front of things. Duffy tended to do that in his first few games. I just think that the games have caught up with him a wee bit, Colin. We don't have the luxury of dropping him. I don't even know if that'd be the best action to take with someone like Duffy in this position. Can he play through it? A lot of players need the games to get over a dip in form. Some others get dropped and then that gives them the spark that they need. So I think Ayer, for me, from what I've seen and I've heard him suggested in that position, I can see why, because he's a player who can take the ball, you can dribble, he can pass. But I still think he's a centre half all day long. It's
interesting, Raya, because he's certainly made his way back through the park as his career's developed. He was a striker at one point, and you could see how he was maybe a striker, because you look at the goals against Motherwell and against Aberdeen, great finishes. I think at Kilmarnock he was played in a defensive midfield role when he went out on loan there, and now he's kind of naturally fit into the centre half position. I still think you can see bits of his previous life out there, because the way he throws himself into tackles, he kind of slides in, not knowing that he's maybe the last line of defence, so that if that guy gets by him, he's basically one-on-one with the goalkeeper.
I was impressed with him against AC Milan, Colin. Sorry to interject there.
Yeah, no, I thought he did a good game against AC Milan, but when you've got an interest from a team like AC Milan, you're going to try and show them what they're going to be signing. So I expected them to have a good game against AC Milan.
Do you think it was an audition?
It almost is, but isn't it? I mean, you look at some of the games, Europe is an audition for a lot of these players. You think of the coaches and the teams that will be watching the guys when they're coming up against AC Milan. It is an audition for them. Do you know what I mean? Like, if Edward scores 3 goals against AC Milan, somebody's going to be watching that and pick up on him. It's the same way that we've picked up on potential targets that we've kind of looked at over the last few years. Shauna Wiesman, who was at Wolfsberger last season, he was scoring all the goals in the Europa League. That's what got him out there and in there into the people's mindsets. So these games are sort of like additions for players, because we're not going to keep them forever. Now,
there's a few suggestions about Thursday night's game, Colin, coming through, and we have Terry Tibbs. You're commenting on YouTube, and Terry thinks that Celtic will win. Never underestimate a wounded animal. I think that goes back to the siege mentality, doesn't it, Colin?
Yeah.
When people react due to the criticism. Now, Gary Doonan, always welcome to see you, Gary, commenting on Facebook. Gary reckons that Lille, like AC Milan, will be a difficult tie whether we are flying or not. Absolutely agree with that. I mean, you mentioned earlier on not conceding a goal, Colin. That means you come away with something. That would be phenomenal to go over there and come back even with a 0-0 or 1-1. It would be a very good result. And going back to Edmund Byrne, who hopes that we can turn in a Lazio-type performance against Lille. Lennon has been very unlucky with player availability this season, and the players that have played have underperformed. So Edmund is harking back to a game that you were at last season, Colin, in Italy. Do you think the team and Lenny have it in them tomorrow night to pull something out the bag like that?
I would be surprised if they do. I'd be absolutely delighted if they do as well. I'd be delighted to come away if we beat Lille tomorrow night. I don't see it happening, but then I didn't see us beating Lazio home and away, so it's just kind of one of these things that anything could happen. All I want to see is a better performance and get ourselves into a state of mind where we go into the game on Sunday against Aberdeen a bit more confident, a bit more self-belief about the team, and have a go and actually just win a game.
Now Gary comes back in just to confirm that Ayer actually played at centre-back for Kilmarnock when he was out there. He played a good number of games out there. I think it was a massive part of his development, Colin, when you think of Ayer going out and developing within the Scottish game at Kilmarnock, and Christie doing the same at Aberdeen also. And, you know, here's the thing, I'm going to throw this one in, right, because although I don't agree with the suggestion of Johan Mjällby returning as a defensive coach, I have heard suggestions about defensive coaches, Colin, and whether or not that's the answer to Celtic's problems at the moment. So what's your thoughts on that? I mean, we spoke about specific coaches at the beginning of the season. You were talking about keeping Craig Gordon in a coaching capacity back then. You obviously went away and rejoined Hearts at that point. So what's your thoughts on bringing in a specialised coach? If you've got a bit of an issue up front or in defence, you bring in a specialist coach. What's your thinking there?
I mean, to bring in a specialist coach would mean that Lennon would need to admit that there's a problem there first, and I don't think he's quite at that stage that he thinks there is a problem there. I mean, he came out and said that Duffy was fantastic in the first half against Aberdeen. I didn't really see that. Maybe we are kind of seeing a different game to what he's seeing. I do think, though, there should be someone that is in that position to kind of guide the team through. When you look at it, John Kennedy is often related to be the defensive coach. I don't know if that comes from when they're doing the warm-ups, he's the one that's left with the sort of back three, back four, back five, whatever it is, when they throw the ball up in the air and they head it out and they do the clearances and stuff like that. I don't know if that's where that's came from, or if it's because he's a centre-half himself. Just because you're a centre-half, just because you're a goalkeeper, just because you're a striker, doesn't mean that you're a coach for that position. When I mentioned about maybe having Craig Gordon in, it was because I see him as being quite a football intellect. I think he's got the ability. He will go on and be a coach at Hearts. I think he is a coach at Hearts as part of his contract. So he's someone that's going to go on and make a career out of it. I think if we do bring in a coach, Johan Mjällby wouldn't be a bad shout. He seemed to work well the last time that he was here, so it may be worth a go.
Well, you know, it's one of these things that I was talking about attacking coaches when we were looking at the lack of strikers that we were producing as a football club, Colin, and what I meant by that is through the youth ranks. You know, there's actually been very few goalies as well. You could probably say centre-halves, you know. Obviously Welsh is coming through, which is great. But, you know, Kevin Graham comes in to say Liverpool have a throw-in coach.
Yeah.
Really? They've got a throw-in coach.
Yeah.
We need one of those and a corner coach. Are you on the wind-up, Kev?
No, I agree with Kevin here.
A corner coach and a throw-in coach.
See when you look at Celtic when they get a throw-in, it's always, there's someone like the fullback always takes it.
But then you need an extra coach to take all these coaches to the games, mate. It's like Man City, they've got two coaches going to every game.
So is Celtic. Celtic's got two coaches going
Who's
to every game at the minute.
Coach?
I don't know if you've seen when they left the video of them leaving the Dakota Hotel ahead of the Rangers game. There was two coaches.
Is that right?
So,
well, there you go. We've not got a room, Kevin, on that second coach for a throw-in coach or a corner coach. Indeed, I just thought surely that is part of the coach's responsibility.
Well, see when you look at the coach,
I mean, that's getting pretty specific.
See when you look at the throw-ins, we struggle to keep the ball from a throw-in, and we have done for quite a long period of time. We always seem to let the team get back in and settle instead of just taking it quick and moving on. I always remember watching a bit of Soccer AM, and Jimmy Bullard was talking about that, and he's saying, if you take the throw in, you're the closest person to the ball, you take the throw in, you don't give it to the fullback who's going to take it off you, because you can then play the 1-2 with the fullback and you've got away from that defender that's marking you. We slow the game down from throw-ins.
I just find it remarkable that can't be coached by a coach. You know, there's such a specific need for that message, Colin. Gary Doonan, just because Liverpool have got it doesn't mean to say it's going to filter into the Scottish game. Just to confirm, John Kennedy isn't a defensive coach. If he was, surely he did not too bad a job with Virgil van Dijk, Denier, KT and converting Beaton. Interesting point, Gary. I mean, you know, it's not all been bad in the realms of the defence. But yes, John Kennedy certainly is not specifically coaching the defence.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I don't think he is the defensive coach. I think a lot of people have that idea that he is the defensive coach. But
what
I don't
about
think
a coach to coach the coaches, says Billy Boy 32. That we're getting into the realms of that, Billy, aren't we?
That's just a tongue twister. I'm not even going to start that.
Deary me. I mean, right, there's a few other things to cover as well. Now, there were some comments came out yesterday in relation to Odsonne Edouard. Now, Odsonne Edouard obviously is Celtic's star man, Colin. We're looking at him for some inspiration when he comes back from his illness. I think when his illness was announced, you probably tried to make light of it, Colin, at the time. It's a non-story. He's still out, unfortunately, and we've lost a wee bit of ground in the meantime, but these things happen. I won't hold that against you. We're hoping he comes back, and when he does, we're hoping we see the Eddie of old, because the guy's a special talent. I don't know if you think he's better up top on his own or as part of two. We saw a very good partnership with Lee Griffiths developing last season, and we've seen some signs that he might be able to craft something with Ayeti as well. But comments yesterday would suggest obviously he's looking at his next move. We knew that anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
I wasn't too excited about anything he said.
No. When you look at the players that we're bringing in, we brought in Edouard for that reason. We gave him a platform so that he could make his next move. He wasn't at the stage yet that he would move on to a big team, but at Celtic he was allowed to improve his development, to put himself out there in the market, and we know that's just the case. That's how it goes. After a couple of years, then these players move on. We're not expecting them to be here for 5, 10, 15 years. That kind of player just isn't there anymore for Celtic when they're looking to bring players on and sell them on at a kind of higher level.
Kevin Graham, that's why Liverpool are the current champions of the world, because they've got a throwing coach.
They could be doing with a defensive coach at the minute. I think they're down to one defender after Fabinho's injury last night. I seen that
this morning. So yes, we do have some speculation around Eddie, but you know, that's par for the course when you've got a player like Edouard, who everybody knows came to the club with a view of developing and moving on. Doesn't always happen. He might not have developed, but he has, and he's a very, very special talent.
Definitely.
Is Odsonne Edouard. I think when we look at last season and we look at the difference, maybe first half to second half, and there'll be statos out there who could give us the figures. There was a definite improvement in the second half of the season. Colin, big part of that was the return of someone to give Eddie some backup, because he had been carrying the can himself for a large part of the start of the season. Seemed a wee bit sluggish at times this season. Now, here we go, because people might say I'm backtracking here. If Edouard comes back, he could be the guy to turn this whole thing on its head in terms of Celtic getting back to winning ways, first and foremost, and the whole tempo of the play improving. We've got Luke Salt there. I think we've both, and most people have been impressed with his performances, albeit he's not been on a winning side yet, unfortunately. But I think he gives you the balance that we were kind of crying out for with Frimpong. I know you're playing him at left back on Thursday night. Taylor, I think if he can concentrate on being a left back, he plays there. And if we're going to go away to Lille and try and get a result, we need to be tight at the back, which has been a criticism of our play in recent weeks. But what was interesting was that Alan Morrison, who runs the Celtic by Numbers blog, sent a report through to us last night, didn't he? And it was looking at whether or not we really were as bad as some fans, myself included, are making out. And he reckons we're not, based on the stats. This season, he reckons we've actually improved. So please, everybody, have a look at that Celtic by Numbers blog. You can find him on Twitter. And he breaks down the stats. He breaks down the performance stats, doesn't he? And I questioned him last night about it. We had a good chat about it, didn't we? And he reckons that he was in my camp before he actually did the analysis, and now he's a bit torn. What did you make of the report?
I think the saying goes stats and damn stats, or if it didn't, I've just made it up. Look, we've had this discussion about stats numerous times. I mentioned how Maurice Bauer is one of the worst footballers I've seen at Celtic Park, and the stats apparently proved me wrong. Said that he was a great player.
Defensive qualities were quite high. Yep.
Greg Taylor's took a lot of stick this season, but he's also got his own backers who say he's got great talents that we've just not seen yet. The stats say that he's the worst left back in Scotland. I don't particularly agree with that, and I think stats can hide a lot of what the fan sees through their own eyes. It's up to us to make our own opinions, and Alan, what he does is fantastic, and I see a lot of people now moving to do like expected goals, expected penalties, expected assists, things like that. It's not for me. I look at it for what I see on the park, and the stats will then show me at the end of the game whether I thought I was right or wrong. But it's not going to change my opinion on it.
I think it's you know what? I think it's good as an addition, Colin. I don't think we can put all the eggs in either of the two baskets. I like to embrace as much information as I can get, and obviously you know that can then shape your opinion. But I would implore anyone to go and check out Alan's blog. It's intriguing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's intriguing stuff. Celtic by Numbers, and Alan will come onto the podcast when he's allowed, and we'll get some more thoughts from him as well. Now, we've had loads of comments coming in, Colin, but before you go, because I won't see you again until next Wednesday, give me a couple of predictions
for tomorrow night.
Lille and Aberdeen.
Tomorrow night. Do you know what? Let's end this on a positive note. Let's kind of look.
It's not been negative.
No, it's not been negative. But let's look positively. We've put the tough week that we've had behind us, and let's look positively towards the next couple of games.
Okay.
Right. Okay. My heart says 1 each tomorrow night.
Lille.
Yes.
Give me a goal scorer.
I'll go with Lee Griffiths to get the goal.
All right. I'll. You know what? I'm going to agree with you there. With that,
my head says we could get beat 3 or 4-1 though, but my heart says 1 each.
Right.
At the weekend against Aberdeen, one-off cup game. We've been very good in cup games. Aberdeen are making the travel down to Glasgow. They don't like coming down here. I'm going to go for Celtic to win 3-1 at the weekend.
I love your positivity. Now, Colin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show after a wee absence. So all that's left for me to say is thank you to everybody who's got involved and who is commenting via Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. And thank you, Colin Watt, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Take care, guys.